Tina, welcome to Work Life. I'm so glad you could be here today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Now, this is great. We are filming this on Inauguration Day. A lot of things going on in the news, but we're going to set politics and the world at large aside, and we're just going to get into a little bit of a conversation of work and life and passion. And I'd love to start out on the work side of things with you. You founded an agency called Kindred PR, and I'd love just to hear a little bit of your backstory. How did you get from college to owning an advertising agency?
Yeah, it's quite a backstory. I've been actually on my own since I was 13 years old, and my parents moved to a really sleepy town in Arizona.
Okay.
And it didn't have a high school. There were 300 people there, and there was no high school. And I grew up in Southern California, and frankly, I was stubborn and entitled, and I thought, I'm staying here, and I'm going to finish high school. And so I did, and I kind of popped around to different friends' houses for my high school years. And that's probably where I became just super scrappy. And I started looking at how do I get where I want to be the fastest, because I was on my own. So
did you have a passion for anything at that time? I mean, did you see yourself sort of in the marketing and advertising world, or no, not at that time?
Not at all. I thought that I was going to be a lawyer, and I thought that I was in the Model United Nations at the time in high school, and I thought that I was going to change the world as a lawyer. So that was my passion at the time, and of course, none of that came to fruition.
Okay. So when did you start to develop an interest in marketing?
Yeah, so I actually ended up in Las Vegas for my last year of high school. And I was working at the time, I had a couple of jobs. I was working at Chili's, and I was working at a CPR and first aid training company. So I taught CPR and first aid. And that's probably where entrepreneurship ended up kind of coming together for me. So my boss at the time was relying on me to create relationships with local companies that needed CPR training at scale, like the hospitals and the water district and things like that. And he was sort of anticipating that I would take over the company. I was 17 years old at the time. And I realized after the fact that I learned a lot of what I know and implement in terms of marketing and sales from that experience. And I also learned that I was competent in terms of running a business and things of that nature. So he ended up selling the company, and he didn't need me anymore. So I got a call from the new owners of the company. I was driving home to my condo one day, and the new owners of the company said that basically like they wanted to cut my hours back. And I said, well, I can't sustain my life on that. This is not my plan. And I turned my car around at that moment, and I drove to Southern California, which is where I grew up. And I showed up at my friend's doorstep and looked in the newspaper and found a job in advertising, applied the next day, got the job, and moved my stuff from Las Vegas. So that's how I started in advertising.
You know, it's so interesting because when I talk to a lot of people, you know, many don't have a straight path, right? Your path kind of zigs and zags, doors open, doors close. But when you look back, you can sort of see how all the dots ended up connecting to get you where you are today. What was that first job that you took when you got that job at that advertising agency?
Oh my gosh, it's a funny story. It's a good question. So I go in for the interview. I'm all dressed up. I had gone shopping because I didn't bring any of my things to California. I had gone shopping the day before. I got myself a suit so that I could apply to this job and look professional. I get in. I get the job at this advertising company. I'm so excited. And I go for my first day of this job, and they take me to a parking lot. I was given like a mentor. They take me to a parking lot, and I find out that this job is actually selling coupons in parking lots. And I worked there for years. But I wanted to do things better. So instead of being in a parking lot and selling coupons, I tried to figure out, okay, how do I get to the corporate buyers of these organizations and figure out how they're going to gift all of these things to their employees for the holidays. And so I started making relationships at this coupon sales company. And so that was really my start in advertising and marketing, and I've been in ever since.
I think when I talk to entrepreneurs, that's a common thread that I see, is that they don't just look at a job as something to do, but they look at a job and say, how could this job be done better? Where is there an opportunity for improvement? How can I do something that can exploit this in such a way that it can be better? And that sounds like that's exactly sort of the mindset that you started to take at that point in your career. And the other thing that's interesting to me is this whole idea around starting to build that network and really understanding who the people are that you need to talk to within these organizations. And my guess is those are some of the same skills that you're using today.
I'm sure that they are. And, there was so much rejection that was a real part of that job. You had to be able to face rejection, and you had to be able to bounce back from it. And I think that that's a lot of how I've been able to be successful at the level that I am now, because it doesn't bother me if I face rejection. It's just about moving to the next thing.
Yeah, I've read so many things where people have talked about the power of rejection and that it really helps, you build a thicker skin so that you're not afraid to take some of those chances, that you can put yourself out there in a way. In some ways, we're living in a very sensitive kind of time, right? Everybody's putting themselves out on Instagram, on Facebook. It's all about likes and followers and things like that. And people can be very sensitive about rejection. Why didn't they accept my friend request? Why didn't they like this picture? But in business, you have to have that thicker skin. You have to be able to accept rejection, because that's a way of forcing yourself to get out there.
Absolutely. I think that it's such an important part of business and competition, and it also really improves you. So I think there's so much to be learned with respect to that rejection, and every time it should be a different rejection and a different obstacle, and you're moving the needle every time.
So fast forward a little bit, and how did you start Kindred? How did that come about?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I finished high school in Las Vegas. So I ended up doing really well at that advertising company.
Yeah,
I opened an office in San Diego, but then 2008 happened, the recession happened, and I thought, I really need to get my act together. I hadn't gone to college at that point. I was making really good money, but I thought, I feel like I need to fortify my life here. So I had a scholarship to go to school in Nevada, and as a result of having graduated in Las Vegas, and I decided to go to UNR. So I traveled back to Nevada. I lived in Reno. Actually, I lived in a small town called Fernley.
Okay.
And went to school at UNR. And during the time that I was in school, I leveraged the history that I had in advertising. And we were advertising specifically at the time for day spas and salons.
Okay.
So I ended up managing a salon and spa franchise in Reno. And I did a lot of the marketing. And I was also on the board of Susan G. Komen at the time.
Okay.
And Susan G. Komen was going through a sort of a PR crisis and having trouble fundraising. And I got this idea to pair the nonprofit and the for-profit together with the Groupon model. So do you remember Groupon still exists, but when it was really big, it just came out. I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could get spas and salons, or whatever the business is, to donate a service, and then the percentage of proceeds goes to a nonprofit. And so I ended up doing this with Botox. And
really? Okay.
Yep. And I organized a deal with Allergan that at the time I wasn't even supposed to talk about, because our Allergan rep, he didn't want the other spas and salons to know that they gave us all this free Botox. So I organized a deal with Allergan, and I ended up using this Groupon model to raise money for Komen, and it was really successful. And it was successful for the spa, and it was successful for our chapter of Susan G. Komen. And so I thought, this is something, I love doing this. I want to raise money for nonprofits. And so I built a business around it. And then the next thing that I did was working with a nonprofit called Camp Taylor. And I got spas and salons around the country to donate services. And then we donate a portion of the proceeds to Camp Taylor. From there, it just kind of iterated. I got a lot of requests to do things. And at the time, I was pulled into this group before influencer marketing had a name.
Was
I
the
was,
thing, yeah.
yeah, I was pulled into this group for CBS and Vanity Fair to get coverage for the Academy Awards and the Emmys and the Billboard Music Awards to trend online. And the platform of choice at that time was Twitter.
Okay.
So we were on a strategy team to get this news to trend, which is how I ended up in entertainment. So now, fast forward to today, most of our clients are in entertainment and media. And we focus a lot around issues like representation in media and diversity, inclusion, corporate social responsibility, and things of that nature. So it's a merger of the passion of the nonprofit and also the entertainment experience.
That's very interesting to me, the way that you're pulling those things together. And it's very front and center on your website that's some of what you do. And what has been the receptivity there? I mean, obviously, we're in a time when there's been a lot of social unrest, there's social justice issues, there's a lot of focus on equality and diversity. So I would imagine this is very top of mind for a lot of clients right now.
Yeah, it is really top of mind. And people are also still very much afraid of it, especially if they have to do something. Like if they haven't done enough with respect to diversity and inclusion inside of their own companies, it's not the time to start publicly doing it or advocating, because you need to work on your own business first before you take it in terms of your communication to the world. So it is really top of mind, but people are also still scared of it.
Mm. And I imagine it's a tricky industry to work in too. A lot of egos, I'm sure, at play.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. I joke that like the reason that we make money is mostly because of ego. So
well, however you do it, I mean, that's an important thing. And then to still have that backdrop of doing things for charitable, for nonprofit organizations, I think that's really a great mission too. You know, part of what we like to explore on this podcast, and I want to get into a little bit more of that later as well, is how you can, blend elements of your work life and your personal life really towards mission and purpose. So that's probably a good segue. So tell me a little bit about some of the things that you're passionate about when you're not doing work. I know that you said you're an aspiring triathlete, or are you a practicing triathlete right now?
Aspiring. So I was supposed to do my first triathlon last May, and as a result of COVID, I didn't end up getting to go. I am now scheduled to do it this November, I think it is, in Spain, in Barcelona.
Oh, you're not messing around. You're going to go overseas to do one. Are you doing one of the big ones like an Ironman or something, a smaller local race?
It's a half Ironman, so 70.3. And I was really pretty well on my way last year, and now I have a bit of a ways to go in terms of training. So that'll be definitely on my schedule in the next several months.
So I have a lot of friends who are triathletes who have participated in races all over the world. So I know the training routines that they embark on to get ready for some of these crazy races. What drew you to that? Because obviously, as an entrepreneur, as a businesswoman who's got multiple things going on, I'm sure that consumes a lot of your life as well as your home life. So is training for an event like a triathlon, is it an escape? Is it a time to clear your head? Is it just the feeling of fitness? What really drew you to that particular sport?
It's a good question. For me, I wanted to have a goal where I kept myself accountable to fitness and made it a part of my daily routine, and also set an example for my kids in terms of this is what having a healthy life looks like, and being active, and whether it's doing a triathlon or just making sure that you're doing something every day. For me, having a goal that I knew, like I paid money for this, I'm going to be accountable to do it, I'm traveling to do it, I'm going to make sure I get it done. So that just keeps me focused and engaged.
I'm interested, we've had a crazy 2020 with the COVID pandemic, certainly continuing here into 2021. But a lot of people have been depressed. They've been frustrated. They've been locked in their homes. They're not having the kind of social interaction that they've had in the past. When you look at your business and you look at your personal life, how important do you think it is to have that full purposeful schedule every day, where you've not only got your work activities, but you've got your fitness routines, you've got your family time, you've got things planned out during the day. Has that really helped, get you through this time of just unsettledness?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think routine is more important than ever. When COVID first happened and my kids so I've been working from home. We've had a remote team for a couple of years. So that part wasn't jarring for me. I already am very routinized in terms of what I do at work every day or at my house every day. But inviting my kids into the mix of that, where now they're homeschooling. Like this morning, I went up into the rooms and I'm like, Mom has a meeting this morning, so don't come down until you hear you hear the computer go off.
The all clear signal, right?
Yes, exactly. So having routines with them right now to make sure that we're both occupied and engaged in different things, that's so important. Also, everything just kind of, when COVID happened, everything seemed to just get very lax for a minute. Like we don't have someplace to be. And I think that having those routines of, okay, this is when we're going to go out for a walk. This is when I'm going to work out. This is when these are the hours that I'm working. Here's when you can ask me questions and I'm really going to engage with you because I want you to see and feel that you're heard. Voicing all of those things to my kids and really working on that with them together has been important.
Yeah, I imagine so. And I think routine is such a powerful tool to be able to keep us on track. I've worked from home for many, many years myself, 25 plus years, really. And, it's easy to get lax, right? You don't have to put on the dress clothes every day to come and sit at your desk. But there is something very important about having routines during your day. When you walk out of your home office, you have your lunch or you have your dinner, and you're not just sitting at your desk all day or doing your work from the couch, because otherwise your personal life and your work life, they become so intertwined that it's hard to really figure out a good flow to your day. At least that's what I've found.
Absolutely. I think that especially for people that work from home, and a lot of people are discovering this now during the pandemic, figuring out those mental cues where you can check in and check out of work, especially when it's the same environment, becomes so important.
Now, I know that you said that you're a lover of wine too. So does this conflict with your triathlete training?
No, I think it's all about balance. I think that
good answer.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that I make sure that I work out is so that I can drink wine and not feel guilty about it.
Oh, that's great. Do you, wine is such an interesting thing to explore because, I mean, the variety is so great, right? Obviously you have your different grapes and whatnot, but then the different regions, the different wineries. How have you sort of found and nurtured that passion? Is it just you like to go to the store, pick up a new bottle of wine, or are you very intentional about how you go out and try to discover new wines?
It's a good question. So I'm just the kind of person that if I'm going to engage with something, I always want to go deeper. I want to know everything about everything. So for example, like right now I'm reading about neuroscience and I'm going down a rabbit hole in neuroscience. And wine a couple of years ago ended up being that for me when I walked into a wine shop. And I was planning a surprise party and I wanted it to be the best wine for the person. So I started talking to the owner of the shop and they invited me to take a wine class. So From there, I ended up in, a year's worth of wine classes. And just the depth of knowledge is what connects me to the wines now, because I love going deeper in it. And it's also just a way to travel vicariously, especially right now during COVID. You can sort of travel through wine and experience the earth in different places and the history of different places. And so that's what's exciting about it for me.
Is that kind of your personality when there's something that really grabs your interest, your attention, that you love to dig deeper into it, really understand it? Yeah,
absolutely.
During this time, has there been any books or anything like that you've read that you found particularly inspiring over this past year?
I've read a ton of books over this past year. I think that I generally read a couple books at a time. One is nonfiction, one is fiction. And I think my favorite nonfiction that I read in the last year is called Behave by Robert Sapolsky. It is a tome and it's super dense in the first couple of chapters in terms of neuroscience. but it gives such a great context to a lot of human behavior. And so my degree is in psychology.
Okay.
So that's probably the foundation for all of this. But it gave such great context to human behavior that I'm able to apply to every, circumstance in my life. I think everybody should read it.
I love that you mentioned that because I was just rereading Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which is such a foundational book for so many business books that have been written since. I think that was written in the 20s. And so many business books today pick up on some of the themes that were originally talked about in that book. And so much of it does come down to psychology, right? It's how our brains work, how connections get made, what we focus on. We tend to think we're such independent thinkers and everything that we're doing is for a specific reason, but many times it's not. It's out of habit, it's out of comfort, it's out of security. There are a lot of those underlying things that really drive our behaviors. We're not as fully functioning sometimes as I think we believe we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing. When you read about psychology, you realize how much of the human experience other people are feeling, and there's a real empathy that happens when you learn about human behavior.
I just started to read this book. I think Ryan Halliday is the author. It's called The Daily Stoic, and it's basically just a very short. Every day of the year, there's a little quote from one of these old Stoic philosophers. Way back in the BC years. And it's amazing how even back then they had sort of pegged how the mind works, how people think. And it's just very interesting to see these thoughts that have stood the test of time the way that they have.
Yeah. I'll have to look into that one. That one sounds interesting.
It's takes literally 2 minutes to read in the morning every day, but it gives you something to think about. It's sort of like one of those old word of the day calendars or something. I'd love to transition because I think this is a great place to do it, just to sort of talk about the final topic that we like to talk about on the show, which is really all about, finding balance, that passion, that purpose in your life. And I know that in addition to what you've done with Kindred and the kinds of things that you're doing in your personal life, you've also started a couple other media companies to focus on some things. So tell me a little about Cause Influence and Et al. Media. What are the purpose of these? And is this really where some of your passion lies?
Yeah. So Cause Influence is our nonprofit. And I really founded the nonprofit as a result of wanting to be able to work with nonprofits, but I wasn't there. Nonprofits couldn't afford the services that we were offering. So Cause Influence is our vehicle to do that. It's our vehicle to do some pro bono work. And we have found a focus with that nonprofit on uplifting underrepresented groups because we work with so many clients in media and entertainment now. That's been a large focus of ours. So we just gave a grant through Cause Influence to a company called F and Funny, which is a production company out of Los Angeles that focuses on diversity and representation in entertainment. And so we will be doing their communications for the next year on through Cause Influence. So we do things like that through our nonprofit arm. And then Et al. Media is a platform for marginalized voices. So it's the ability for marginalized groups, women, LGBTQ, people of color, to tell their stories in their own voices. And I'm passionate about that for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, I've had this history working in sort of representation in media. And two, my daughter is transgender. And so we've had our own path and story. And I want to make sure that she feels represented and that I'm doing what I can to create that world for her. So that's what Et al. Media is all about.
That's really exciting. So would you classify it sort of as a medium kind of a platform, where people can write and contribute articles? Is that a good analogy to what it is?
Yeah, people can contribute to the publisher. It's like any other publisher with a contributor platform, but Medium is a good analogy.
That's really interesting. So when you look out, the next year, 5 years or so, where do you see, what are some things that are still on your list that you want to accomplish?
That's a good question. I think my company, Kindred, I definitely want to grow it and work on some bigger projects and have some more impact. So that's something that we're always focused on. And then in terms of the nonprofit, I mean, the big goals are making sure that our media and entertainment landscape is fully representative of the unique voices that exist in our world. So we're going to be tilting at that as well. So obviously that's a pretty big goal. We have a long ways to go, but that's something that we're passionate about.
Yeah, and I said at the top of the show, we don't dip too much into politics here, but I think it's worth talking about just a little bit here as we wrap up that, voices never have had more of an opportunity to be heard than they do today with all of these platforms. But yet this confirmational bias that we all have has never been stronger. And when you have big technology companies that use algorithms to figure out the kinds of things you like, it's very easy to get a storyline or storylines that are very one-sided. And so I think when you're talking about creating platforms that give underrepresented voices an opportunity to be heard more, I think that's such a noble kind of a goal. Do you really see big challenges ahead as we sort of navigate through some of these difficulties that have really been exposed over the last couple of years with this confirmation bias and how facts have just been a little bit distorted in the media?
Absolutely. This is a topic that I'm super passionate about and I speak about sometimes. I think that the general public is just now starting to realize how they've been in a filter bubble. And when we say filter bubble, what that means is you've been fed, or we've all been fed information that agrees with us in terms of our viewpoints. And so we think the world agrees with us. And our confirmation bias continues to be reinforced over and over again as a result of this. And that's obviously what has led to the polarization that we're experiencing. So one thing that was really important to me when we founded At All is that it really is for all voices. Nobody is excluded. And that means they don't have to agree with me if they want to be represented on the platform. I think that the fact issue is a separate issue. And that's something that it's going to be hard to reconcile in terms of how these large corporations are treating, like, how do you cue the public that there's misinformation being spread? How does the consumer, the reader of the content, get educated to figure out when something is not true? This is a bipartisan issue, or it should be, where people really just need to get educated on what a fact is and how to differentiate that online. And it really is a result of a broken advertising ecosystem that sort of is conflicted. So There's a lot to have to reconcile in terms of that.
You don't have to go back that many years to watch, old newsreels of Walter Cronkite or something on the evening news. And they were so particular about whenever they said something that was opinion, they would have, commentary or something that would show up, on the screen so that people knew that this was somebody's opinion versus, what they distilled as was fact. Now it's very hard to watch any channel and not hear all of these adjectives getting thrown around, which is a clue right there that, there's probably a lot of opinion that is going into that. And we just do live in a world where there is so much opinion flying, and people would rather express an opinion than say it's a viewpoint and be open to other viewpoints. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see particularly how some of these large corporations are going to handle the issue, and then how the public responds.
And I'm glad you said about marketing as well, because marketers certainly play a role in this. I know when I'm working with my clients, it's very easy to talk about things that aren't real. The simple example is, we're the number one XYZ of this. It's number one of what? What does that really mean? People can inflate, what a product does, what a service does, how it can transform somebody's life. And I think you have to be very careful about that.
Yeah, I think that that's such a good point. I had written an article for Forbes a couple of years ago that basically, I don't remember the headline, but it was, marketers, we have to assume our responsibility in this because we are part of the problem. And we talk about like Facebook is the problem or Google is the problem, but really there's a huge industry of people that are taking advantage of the system. And there's room for marketers to understand the ethics that we're grappling with. So that's a big issue. And then another part of that is the consumer population, which I'm a part of. So when you think about Facebook, it's a mirror that reflects what you want to see. So how do consumers get better at figuring out what they want to pay attention to, so that they shift the whole mindset as well?
Yeah, and I think just consumers being smart to understand that, what they're seeing is the result of some very high-tech machinery, underneath the covers that is putting certain things in front of you. We've all had the experience where we've gone to look at a pair of shoes, and then every social media platform that we go on seems to be showing that same pair of shoes, in our news feeds and whatnot. There's a lot of technology at work, which is great as a marketer because it gives us tools to be able to specifically target things. But you also have to be aware that that's exactly what's going on, and it's not random that these things are happening.
Right. And I think that is something that we're just sort of, as a general population, people are just starting to understand the level of targeting that's possible. And it's, in some ways it adds conveniences, and in others it's totally horrifying. So I think that balance is going to be a big part of the discussion moving forward as well.
Absolutely. So I want to end this on a positive note, not necessarily about the controversies with Facebook and Google and others. So let me just ask, you said you're going to do this half triathlon in Spain. Do you have a goal to do a full?
Oh, it's a good question. So far, I'm just focused on the half. I probably will get, I've already kind of got the triathlon bug in terms of how much of a part of my routine it is. So I'm sure the next step will be the full.
So Kona is in the plan one day, huh?
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day. Well, that's exciting. Tina, I can't thank you enough for being a guest here today on the Work Life Show. It's really fun to hear people's stories. I think you've got a very interesting backstory. I love some of the things you're doing on the nonprofit side. I think giving a voice to some of these groups who just don't have as loud a voice in today's very cluttered and hectic landscape out there is great. And just thank you again for taking the time to be on the show today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Eric. And congratulations on your show. I think that this is a wonderful topic and it's worth exploring. So I'm looking forward to following it and hearing more from you.
Oh, well, thanks. I really do appreciate that. And just so our viewers know, I will have all of Tina's contact information in the show notes so that you can find her and you can find Kindred and the other platforms that we talked about on the show today. So thank you again. Have a great rest of your week.